Opening sequence. When the road turns against you. It begins like any ordinary drive home. Warm air fills the cabin. A familiar voice plays through the speakers. Outside, snow drifts calmly across the windshield. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent. Then the brake lights appear. Hundreds of them. Red, unmoving, stretching into the distance. Traffic slows. It hesitates, and then it stops. 20 minutes pass, then an hour, then another. The sun slips below the horizon, and with it goes the last of the day's warmth. The temperature drops fast. You glance at the fuel gauge. It's lower than you expected, and in that quiet moment, something shifts. You are no longer commuting. You are no longer protected by routine. You have entered one of the most dangerous survival scenarios of the modern age. Every winter, thousands of drivers are trapped on frozen highways during blizzards and sudden gridlock. Most believe the danger is obvious, that hunger or cold will be what kills first. But history, physiology, and survival science reveal a far more unsettling truth. People don't die because they run out of food. They die because they make small, invisible mistakes long before desperation sets in. There are 5 physical killers and 1 psychological collapse that follows close behind. Together, they decide who survives the night and who never makes it home. Here on Historia Prime, we explore what happens when modern comfort fails and ancient laws take over. Drawing from Inuit thermal engineering, the inner heat disciplines of Himalayan monks, and the mental resilience of Roman Stoics, we will expose the 6 things that kill people first when traffic stops in winter. Miss 1 rule, leave 1 pipe uncleared, get 1 layer wet, trust 1 false instinct, and sleep may quietly become your last mistake. This is not about fear, it's about preparation, and it starts now. Part 1. The air that kills, without a sound. The first thing that kills people in winter traffic jams doesn't look dangerous. You can't see it, you can't smell it, and by the time you feel it, it's already winning. It's carbon monoxide. When the road locks up in a blizzard, instinct takes over. Your body tells you to stay warm. You turn the engine on. You let the heater run. It feels logical, it feels safe. And for a short while, it works. But snow doesn't just fall around your car, it slowly builds a wall around it. As drifts rise beneath the bumper, they conceal the tailpipe without you ever noticing. When that happens, exhaust has nowhere to escape. Instead of flowing away behind the vehicle, toxic gases pool under the chassis, then creep upward. They slip through floorboard seams, ventilation ducts, and microscopic gaps in the cabin. Places you never knew existed. Carbon monoxide doesn't burn your lungs. It doesn't trigger panic. It doesn't make you gasp for air. It hijacks your blood. CO binds to red blood cells 200 times faster than oxygen, pushing life itself out of circulation. Your brain begins to starve quietly. At first, it feels harmless. A dull headache, mild nausea, a strange heaviness behind the eyes. It feels like fatigue. It feels like the flu. So people ignore it. That is why entire families have been found in stopped cars during winter storms, appearing to be asleep. No signs of struggle, no warning cries, just silence. In high concentrations, carbon monoxide can kill in under 5 minutes. History has already written this lesson in blood. During the Great Blizzard of January 1996, dozens of motorists in New York and Philadelphia were poisoned while waiting for traffic to clear. Not because they froze, but because they never cleared their tailpipes. Survival in this moment comes down to one habit. You must treat the tailpipe like an airway. If snow is falling, you get out and check it. You clear it completely and dig a small channel behind the car so exhaust can escape freely. And you don't trust warmth blindly. You follow the 10-minute rule. Run the engine and heater for only 10 minutes each hour, then shut it down. While it runs, you crack a window slightly, always on the side away from the wind, to allow fresh air to circulate. Cold air is uncomfortable. Poisoned air is final. This is the first killer because it feels like comfort. And comfort, in winter survival, is often the most dangerous lie of all. Part 2. The frozen armor you build yourself. The second thing that kills people doesn't come from the cold outside. It comes from a voice inside your head. It's the urge to act, to fix the situation, to do something. You see the car ahead spinning its tires. You grab the door handle and think, if I just push for a minute, if I shovel this out, we can get moving. It feels responsible, it feels helpful, and in winter survival, it can be fatal. This is the moment people fall into what cold weather explorers called the wet cold trap. In sub-zero conditions, sweat is not relief. Sweat is a countdown. Heavy winter clothing traps heat, and when you overexert, pushing vehicles, shoveling snow, struggling against ice, you begin to perspire fast. That moisture soaks into your base layers, and here's the physics that kills. Water pulls heat away from your body about 25 times faster than air does. The instant you stop moving, that damp layer turns against you. It chills, it stiffens, and then it freezes. Early Arctic explorers had a name for this mistake. They called it the suit of armor. Wool and cotton clothing, soaked with sweat, would freeze solid overnight, forming an icy shell around the body. Once that happened, survival time collapsed. A damp shirt at 0 degrees doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it drains heat so aggressively that it can pull the life out of you in minutes. There's another danger most people never consider. Extreme cold constricts blood vessels and spikes blood pressure. Combine that with sudden, intense exertion, lifting snow, pushing 2 tons of metal, and you create the perfect trigger for cardiac failure. Every winter, nearly 100 people die not from blizzards, but from heart attacks brought on by shoveling snow. They weren't weak, they were urgent. Survival here isn't about strength, it's about restraint. You have to manage your body the way you manage fuel, carefully, conservatively. Being slightly cool and dry is infinitely safer than being warm and soaked in sweat. Warmth can be rebuilt. Moisture is a trap. If movement is absolutely necessary, you move with what the Stoics called deliberation. Slow, controlled, purposeful. You keep your breathing steady. You stop before you sweat. You treat every action as an investment, not a reaction. Because in winter survival, the body doesn't forgive impatience, and the armor you build with sweat is the hardest one to escape. Part 3. The cold you drink. Hours have passed. Your mouth is dry, your hands are shaking, and stress is grinding you down. Outside the window, snow stretches in every direction. The thought comes quietly and feels logical. I'll just eat some snow. That single decision has killed more people than hunger ever has. Snow is not water, it is frozen crystal, and your body cannot use it until it becomes liquid. To do that, your core must supply the heat to melt it. That heat comes from the same internal reserves keeping your heart beating and your brain awake. When you eat raw snow, you are stealing heat from yourself. The effect is brutal. Core temperature drops, shivering intensifies, hypothermia accelerates. You trade mild dehydration for systemic thermal collapse. It's like pouring ice directly into your furnace and expecting it to keep running. People assume snow hydrates. In reality, it drains you. Indigenous Arctic cultures learned this lesson thousands of years ago. They never ate raw snow. Instead, they melted it slowly using body heat. A small amount of liquid water went into a container, a little snow was added, and the vessel was worn inside clothing, against the skin. Excess metabolic heat did the work gently, without shocking the body. The principle is simple. Melt first, drink second. That is why a metal cup and a lighter matter. That is why a single candle can be life-saving. Even a small flame, 30 or 40 watts, can turn snow into usable water. A beeswax candle can burn for days, quietly converting danger into survival. In winter, thirst lies. Cold steals from the inside first, and what you swallow can kill you faster than what you lack. Part 4. Dressed for the ride, doomed by the crash. The fourth killer doesn't appear when traffic stops. It's already with you when you turn the key. It's the mistake of dressing for comfort, not survival. Modern cars feel like sealed shelters. You step out of a warm house, walk a few steps to a heated vehicle, then drive to another heated building. So you dress lightly. A thin jacket, stylish shoes, enough for the ride. But when the engine dies, the illusion collapses. Glass and metal don't hold heat. They bleed it. And once your heater shuts off, your car doesn't protect you. It accelerates heat loss. In less than 45 minutes, the temperature inside the cabin will match the temperature outside. What felt like shelter becomes a freezer made of steel. Your feet fail first. If you're wearing dress shoes or thin sneakers, frostbite can begin in under 30 minutes at sub-zero temperatures. Toes lose circulation. Tissue freezes. And once your feet are compromised, walking to safety is no longer an option, even if help is close. Cold doesn't kill evenly. It takes mobility first. Long before modern vehicles existed, Arctic peoples solved this problem with ruthless precision. The Inuit parka wasn't just clothing, it was thermal engineering. Caribou fur contains hollow hairs with honeycomb-like cores that trap dead air. Air doesn't conduct heat well, so these pockets form a stable barrier warmed by the body itself. They wore 2 layers, one facing inward to hold heat, one outward to shed wind and moisture. You don't need caribou hide to survive a winter gridlock, but you do need layers, and you need them ready. A wool blanket matters because wool still insulates when wet. Heavy winter boots matter because circulation in the feet determines whether you can move, react, or escape. And timing matters most of all. You put the boots on the moment traffic stops, not later, not when you feel cold. Because once your fingers go numb, laces become impossible and decisions become irreversible. Winter doesn't punish ignorance, it punishes delay. Part 5. When the body shuts down from the inside. The fifth killer doesn't strike all at once. It works quietly, patiently, and by the time you recognize it, your ability to fight back is already fading. This is systemic thermal collapse. This is hypothermia. Hypothermia begins when your core body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. In a stalled vehicle, the process accelerates fast. Metal and glass don't protect you, they conduct cold. Heat drains from your body through radiation and direct contact with the chassis beneath you, minute by minute, without drama. At first, your body resists. Shivering starts, violent, uncontrollable. This is your last mechanical defense, muscles rubbing together to create heat through friction. But shivering burns energy quickly, and as your reserves drop, the nervous system slows. Fingers lose precision. Movements become clumsy. Speech thickens. Thoughts begin to fracture. This is where hypothermia turns lethal. Survivors describe it as mental freezing. Anxiety overloads the brain. Simple tasks, checking a tailpipe, cracking a window, signaling for help, suddenly feel impossibly complex. Judgment collapses. People stop making decisions not because they don't care, but because the brain can no longer sequence action. The final stage is the most disturbing. As temperature regulation fails, the brain misfires. Blood vessels dilate. A wave of false warmth floods the body. Victims feel overheated and begin removing clothing in freezing conditions, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. Many are found partially unclothed, having unknowingly accelerated their own death in the final minutes. But humans have fought cold from the inside before. While Arctic cultures perfected insulation, Himalayan monks mastered internal heat. Through a practice known as tumo, inner fire, monks learned to raise peripheral body temperature using controlled breathing and muscle engagement. Scientific studies showed increases of up to 17 degrees Fahrenheit in fingers and toes, achieved without movement. You don't need years of training to apply the principle. Deep diaphragmatic breathing, slow and deliberate, stimulates circulation. Isometric muscle tension, clenching the core, glutes and thighs without movement, generates heat internally without sweat. It keeps blood flowing, it keeps the nervous system awake, and most importantly, it keeps you conscious and deliberate. Hypothermia doesn't kill by force, it kills by confusion. Stay dry, stay still, stay mentally engaged, because once the mind goes quiet, the body follows. Part 6. The lie that pulls you into the storm. The final killer is the most tragic of all, because it doesn't come from cold or hunger or lack of gear. It comes from a thought. It usually arrives late, 8 hours in, 9, sometimes more. The fuel is gone, the car is silent. Cold presses in from every surface. Fear sharpens, and then you see it, a faint light flickering somewhere in the white distance. Maybe it's a farmhouse, maybe it's a highway sign, and a single sentence forms in your mind. I can walk to that, it's not far. That thought has ended more lives than blizzards ever did. This is the exit strategy illusion. In heavy snow, your senses betray you. Depth perception collapses. That light might be half a mile away, or 5 miles. There's no way to know. And the moment you open the door and step out, you abandon the only shelter you have. If a whiteout hits, and they come without warning, visibility drops to 0. The car disappears behind you, the light vanishes ahead, and without visual anchors, the human body cannot walk straight. One leg is subtly dominant. You drift, you curve, you walk in circles until exhaustion wins and the cold finishes the job. Survival psychology teaches the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water. But there's a rule beneath all of them. You will not survive 3 seconds without hope. The moment you surrender to panic, the brain stops solving problems. This is known as give-up-itis, the quiet collapse where effort feels pointless and movement becomes random instead of deliberate. The Romans understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that while we cannot control events, we can control our response to them. The obstacle, he said, becomes the way. The storm is not an enemy to flee, it is a test to endure. That mindset saves lives, because the rule is simple and unforgiving. Stay with the vehicle. A car is shelter. It is visibility. It is a massive reflective object that rescuers can find far more easily than a human body buried in drifting snow. There is only one exception. If a clearly occupied building is visible and within 100 yards, and conditions allow safe movement, then you move deliberately. Otherwise, you stay. Hope is not passive. Hope is discipline. And in winter survival, discipline is what keeps you alive long enough to be found. Conclusion: when physics replaces comfort. Traffic jams are a nuisance of modern life, but winter gridlock is something else entirely. When the road freezes and movement stops, the rules you live by every day quietly disappear. Society pauses, convenience fails, and in that vacuum, only physics remains. Heat moves where physics allows it. Oxygen behaves how chemistry demands. The body obeys biology, not optimism. That is what decides who survives. We've seen how people don't die first from hunger or isolation, but from small misunderstandings of reality. Carbon monoxide kills because air must move. Sweat kills because water steals heat. Snow kills because energy is finite. Poor clothing kills because insulation matters more than fashion. Hypothermia kills because the brain slows before the body does. And panic kills because hope, once abandoned, takes action with it. Survival was never about bravery. It was about alignment with reality. As an old Japanese proverb reminds us, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Not because you're stronger than the storm, but because you refuse to stop responding intelligently to it. Preparation looks boring until it becomes everything. Before the next storm, open your trunk. Add a wool blanket, a metal cup, a candle, a small shovel. Today they look like clutter. On a frozen highway at midnight, they become the difference between endurance and a headline. So here's the question that matters. If you were trapped right now, which of these 6 threats would challenge you first? And what is one simple item you could put in your car tonight that might save your life tomorrow? Leave your answer in the comments. Don't rely on hope alone. Rely on physics. Rely on preparation. Stay warm, stay deliberate. And thank you for watching Historia Prime.